So how do you get a sense of depth in your landscape paintings? That's what I want to show you today in this video, where I'm demonstrating on a student's portrait. And this actually is her sketch that I printed out on a canvas. And I just started doing some layers, some glazes to demonstrate to her how to approach her painting. And in this video, like I said, I want to show you how important depth is in your landscape, how you can use that in your acrylic portraits, because many portraits involve landscape backgrounds. And in this painting, we actually have kind of a setting here where we have a little boy with his dog, and we've got some hills in the background, and we want to create a sense of depth. I'm going to show you how to do that. Before I do that, though, let me just dive in here with a word of prayer, and then we'll get right into the lesson. Father, I ask a blessing on this lesson. Help me to be able to show how to get depth in this portrait. Guide my brush strokes. Bless the students that are watching this. I pray it would be encouraging and helpful to them. And I ask all this in Jesus' name. Amen. All right, we're going to dive in here. And let's begin by taking a flat edge brush. And what we're going to do is mix a little bit of raw umber dark and a little bit of ultramarine blue. Okay, just had a little technical difficulty there, but the show must go on. Okay, so raw umber dark, a little bit of ultramarine blue, and actually we'll have this mixture more to the ultramarine blue side. We're mixing it into a little bit of matte medium. That's what we do with a glazing technique, where we mix small amounts of paint with matte medium to make it translucent, to build up depth. Now let's add just a tiny bit of Indian yellow to this, and we're going to create kind of a nice greenish color. And if you're wondering how to, paint greenery, how to paint trees and hills, this is a nice color mixture for the shadows. And this will create a sense of depth by having the area in front darker than what's in the back. So this is rule number one for creating depth, is to make sure you've got your colors in the front more vibrant, and then your values darker than what you have in the back. So notice here, if we scroll over to our reference photo, this is what we're working from. Notice how we've got some lighter trees in the back there, and how it is much lighter, and that is giving us a sense of depth. The colors are cooler in tone, the values are lighter, and then it's darker in the front. And that's what we're going to try to emulate here. This is actually what we'd call the midground, but we're going to be able to put in these tones here to create that sense of depth. And I'm kind of following what I see in the sketch to some degree. Also looking at the reference photo to make sure I'm putting in these tones in the right area as much as possible. Now I can see that this area here is lighter. Actually, we want to paint around this and bring some of these shadow colors down a bit. I'm just going to slightly adjust this mixture, add a little more blue and Indian yellow to it. I'm pulling more from this other side. Get that color just a little bit more to the greenish side. And then if you wanted to see this here on my white card, this is what the glaze actually looks like apart from the painting. All right, so let's continue on here. Just want to make sure I don't have too much of this glaze in my brush, so I just wiped a little bit off in the palette. Okay, so continue on here and just get a sense of what's going on. You can quickly kind of block this in here. Put a little bit of a darker area below to create a sense of the light hitting the tops of the trees. Here we've got, it looks like a little bit of the ground formations. We're going to get in some of the little nooks and crannies in here. Some of the foliage leading up to the actual bushes and trees where they grow out of. All right, so here's a nice strong form. We want to get that in. Part of, getting a realistic landscape depends a lot on your sketch, and you want to make sure you have your forms accurately depicted. And if you can always also adjust it in the painting stage as well, but having an accurate sketch helps quite a bit. All right, now we will add a little bit of a glaze to the tree on the right hand side, and it's a little darker behind his head here. We just kind of fan it out in a few different directions. Okay, and we'll shade up here behind the hill a little bit, and a little bit behind there. Yeah, again, just darkening this mid-ground so that, it causes the background to recede more. And we can use some of the same glaze that we have mixed, because it's good to not have this the only occurrence of the color. We can also add it to a few other areas, like we can add it to some of the foreground as well. So let's go ahead and do that. We'll just, let's go to the other camera, and we'll add a couple of little nuances right in here, just to kind of, distribute the color, so we have some color unity throughout the image. And just kind of keep the strokes going somewhat vertically and with the orientation of the grass. That's what we have here. And then we can also take this glaze and let's add some matte medium to it. Okay, the same color, and just make it a little more translucent. So the matte medium is clear. Again, that basically makes it more transparent or translucent. And then we will go ahead and we'll add a little bit of a glaze to the water, deepening and darkening that. We're painting around the child at this point, just developing a greater sense of depth here. And that builds up more visual interest. And again, it helps the background then to recede more, because we have these darker colors in the front. So notice I'm not adding these darker green colors to the hills in the back. We want that to recede. And then we really can push this effect more by following up over this with a lighter color, which would, we have the less saturated, more grayish versions of the color for the darker values, the shadowed parts of the hills and the trees and the grass. But now we're going to follow up with a warmer color for the highlights. So two different colors we're using, two different mixtures. And so for this, we're going to also switch brushes, whereas in this other one we used like a 1/4 inch flat. Here we're going to use maybe like a 3/4, so something quite a bit wider, and you can see the difference here, and how that, let's try this camera, you can see the difference between these two brushes just in the overall width of application. So then this smaller one works better for these small shadow shapes, but then this larger one will work better for this lighter color, because that's going to go over everything. I'm not going to actually try to paint around what I just did, because we're not doing this opaquely. We literally can overlap this color, and we can get the synergistic effect of these two different colors and values working together. So let's go ahead and do that. Let's create another glaze here, and hopefully that will be dry enough that it won't disturb it. It dries pretty quickly because it's such a thin layer, but sometimes you still have to check. So let's take some Indian yellow and phthalo blue. So those two colors can work pretty well together, and if you want to get it even more vibrant, you can add azo yellow, and that gives us an even more vibrant green. This should work pretty well. Let's get a little more Indian yellow in the mix. Okay, that's pretty nice and vibrant. Now notice the difference between these two colors. That's quite dark over there, quite cooler in tone, more grayish, because we use raw umber dark, ultramarine blue, and Indian yellow. But here, because we're using a different kind of blue, a phthalo blue instead of an ultramarine blue, that phthalo blue has more of a greenish tint to it, and that causes it to optically mix with the Indian yellow with a more vibrant color profile. It's much more saturated, the pigmentation is much more intense, and it's going to work, like I say, way better for these lighter areas. So let's go ahead and do that. Let's apply this glaze, and I'll show it to you on the white card. You can see the difference there as well, how much more vibrant that color is. Just the overall intensity and saturation of the pigment or chroma is just more vibrant. Okay, let's go ahead and work this in. So we're not going to add this color in the background, so that's something to keep in mind. It's not going to go all the way in the hills back here, because we want that to be a cooler tone, but we will put it in the midground and especially in the foreground. So I'm going to actually start with the foreground first, and then we'll work our way out from there. Let's use the other camera. Here we go. Alright, so as we apply this, you'll be able to really see how we're creating a sense of depth right away. Alright, and I'm going to put this all the way in the foreground, and I'm not going to fill it in like everywhere, because there's a couple of spots where there's dirt, so we're going to let that kind of shine through. Using kind of diagonal brush strokes to really distribute the color and make it smooth. Put a little bit of this into the back here, because there's an area where that color is a little more vibrant right there. And then right here we kind of have some little hills going on. So put it in here and a little bit in this area. Now I'm pushing the paint out of the brush, and I'm not reloading my brush, okay, just so I don't have too much glaze on there. See, this layer here is a little bit thicker than what I have here, because this is where I started with more paint on my brush, and now that the supply is almost exhausted off the end, this means that I'm getting a little bit more of a faded look, and that's exactly what I want, because the midground is not as vibrant as the foreground. We can just push a little bit of this color into the hills. Just kind of drag it across, get a little of that color in there, but not the background. Let's actually load up the brush a little more. As a matter of fact, I'm gonna pull from this somewhat more greenish version of the mix, add a little matte medium. And yeah, we need to have a little more glaze on the brush than what we had. So let's add that on there. I don't want to overbrush it, or I might disturb the shadows that I put down, because I don't think they're bone dry. They're just dry to the touch. That's enough right there. And I think there is just a little hint of that green just in the front part of the background. So let's put in a little bit right there, but I'm not going to put it in those hills on the top. We're not going to put it there. All right, so you can see the sense of depth we're building. Now I haven't really done anything with the dog and the boy yet, because I've been concentrating more on doing the landscape part of this for this particular exercise. But you can get a sense now how you can use value and color to build up depth in your landscape. And again, for anyone who wants to do portrait painting, you're going to eventually need to learn how to paint some landscapes, because they inevitably come into play in the backgrounds of what you do. And so I hope this tutorial helps you. If it does, give it a thumbs up, like and subscribe to this channel. If you look at the link in the video, in the description of the video, and in the top comment, I have something special for you that you can download that'll help you in your portrait painting. So check that out. But anyway, God bless you. Thank you so much for watching, and look forward to seeing you in the next video. Take care.